Welcome, welcome. Let's read the Federalist Papers. We're still in the essay of John Jay. Very interesting cat. We're on page 18, okay, towards the bottom. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them. Hey, that's catchy. Although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another. Notwithstanding their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept in flame. Look at this. Mutual jealousies perpetually kept in flame. Who's doing that today? Right? This is very interesting. And for a long series of years, they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful in assisting each other. Weighing the pros and cons. The outcomes, right? Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished? Instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interests, envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection and the partial interests of each confederacy. Instead of the general interests of all America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Wow. It's very great order. Hence, like most other bordering nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war or live in constant apprehension of them. Bordering nations. On the borders, drama, okay. The most sanguine advocates for 3 or 4 confederacies cannot reasonably suppose that they would long remain exactly on equal footing in point of strength. So that's interesting. If you're broken up into these different confederacies, one might get stronger than the other, and when the other one gets stronger, since you're not bonded by this union, it might, decide to take matters further. Even if it was possible to form them so at first, but admitting that to be practicable, yet what human contrivance can secure the continuance of such equality? And from that equality, the disturbance of peace happens essentially. Due to human jealousy, right? Independent of those local circumstances which tend to beget and increase power in one part and to impede its progress in another, we must advert to the effects of that superior policy and good management which would probably distinguish the government of one above the rest, and by which their relative equality in strength and consideration would be destroyed. So the relative equality and strength would get destroyed. For it cannot be presumed that the same degree of sound policy, prudence, and foresight would uniformly be observed by each of these confederacies for a long succession of years. So foresight would let you know that the uniformness of their temporary alliance, it might not work. Therefore, he's contending you need to have a unified federal government. Whenever and from whatever causes it might happen, and happen it would. He's very good at that rhetorical. He's very good. He's like that any one of these nations or confederacies should arise on the scale of political importance, much above the degree of their neighbors. That moment would those neighbors behold her with envy and with fear. Okay, so envy and fear. So when the degree of inequality arises between these bordering nations, you're either going to have envy and fear, and if you have envy, they attack. Fear, they might go on like, we have to really prepare, right? Keeping the peace, he's contending, would be much harder. But those passions would lead them to countenance, if not to promote, whatever might promise to diminish her importance, and would also restrain them from measures calculated to advance or even to secure her prosperity. So look at that. So one side's going to say, how do we calculate our advancements, and how do we secure our prosperity, and how do we restrain theirs and diminish their importance? Get it? Much time would not be necessary to enable her to discern these unfriendly dispositions. She would soon begin not only to lose confidence in her neighbors, but also to feel a disposition equally unfavorable to them. Distrust naturally creates distrust, and by nothing is goodwill and kind conduct more speedily changed than by invidious jealousies and uncandid imputations. Invidious jealousies, uncandid imputations, whether expressed or implied. Dang, he's good. He's really good. The North is generally the region of strength, and many local circumstances render it probable that the most northern of the proposed confederacies would, at a period not very distant, be unquestionably more formidable than any of the others. No sooner would this become evident than the northern hive would excite the same ideas and sensations in the more southern parts of America which it formerly did in the southern parts of Europe. Nor does it appear to be a rash conjecture that his young swarms might often be tempted to gather in honey in the more blooming fields and milder air of the luxurious and more delicate neighbors. That's an interesting bee example. Look at that. The young swarms, so young men, they have very potent blood, uses the bug analogy, to gather honey, so they see the grass is greener on that side. They want it, they desire it, they want that sweet, sugary satisfaction. Blooming fields, so prosperity, that people having prosperity. Milder air, maybe more peace and tranquility in the air, and they see it, they're like, okay, it's right for the plucking. After the luxurious, more delicate neighbors. Yeah, I see it. So if the neighbors are delicate, they're peaceful, they have prosperity, people might have that young hot blood, they're rash, they're swarming, they're just like, oh, we want it, right? Let's go get it. Very good example of the bee, of an insect metaphor, right? They who well consider the history of similar divisions and confederacies will find abundant reason to apprehend that those in contemplation would in no other sense be neighbors than as they would be borderers, that they would neither love nor trust one another, but on the contrary would be a prey to discord, jealousy, and mutual injuries. In short, that they would place us exactly in the situations in which some nations doubtlessly wish to see us. Wow. Formidable only to each other. Wow. From these considerations, it appears that those persons are greatly mistaken who suppose that alliances, offensive and defensive, might be formed between these confederacies, and would produce that combination of and union of wills and arms and resources. Okay. A union of wills, arms, and resources. Supplies, weapons, characters, fortitude, energy, which would be necessary to put and keep them in a formidable state of defense against foreign enemies. So you need that. You need this unification. Again, he reiterates it here, to stave off a foreign enemy. When did the independent states into which Britain and Spain were formerly divided combine in such an alliance or unite their forces against a foreign enemy? The proposed confederacies will be distinct nations. Each of them would have its commerce and with foreigners to regulate by distinct treaties. And as their productions and commodities are different and proper for different markets, so would those treaties be essentially different. Well, yeah. Different commercial concerns must create different interests. That's true. I mean, yeah, Economics 101. And of course, different degrees of political attachment to and connection with different foreign nations. Yes, we're seeing that especially now with China. Hence, it might and probably would happen that the foreign nation with whom the Southern Confederacy might be at war would be the one with whom the Northern Confederacy would be the most desirous of preserving peace and friendship. An alliance so contrary to their immediate interests would not therefore be easy to form, nor, if informed, would it be observed and fulfilled with perfect good faith. Wow. So, already, we're only 20 pages deep, and John Jay has laid it out. He makes a case, but you can see why he's so important. Very interesting. Treaties and trade. Huh.